Welcome to Microlecture 29. We're going to talk about optical activity and racemic mixtures, or racemates. So optical activity is a physical property of chiral molecules. In the lab, you can measure this property using a polarimeter. The polarimeter will take light, which goes out in all directions, and polarizes it, so that the light is going in only one direction when it hits the sample. And the chiral sample, being chiral, is going to rotate that plane polarized light in one direction or the other, clockwise or counterclockwise. And so we measure the angle and degree of that rotated plane polarized light. The outcome is what we call a specific rotation, or an alpha sub d. It's derived from just the angle, which is shown in the image in the bottom, alpha. So enantiomers have alpha values, or alpha sub d values, that are equal in magnitude but opposite in direction, or opposite in sign. To illustrate this idea, let's go back to the two enantiomers of thalidomide. So they're shown here as being plus R enantiomer and the minus S enantiomer. The plus and the minus refer to the rotation of plane polarized light, whether it's clockwise or counterclockwise. So while before you understood that R thalidomide and S thalidomide would be enantiomers of one another, now you understand that plus thalidomide and minus thalidomide are also enantiomers of one another. It's important to keep in mind here that R is not always going to correlate with plus, and S is not always going to correlate with minus. The plus and minus designations are physical properties that are measured in the laboratory, whereas R and S are based off of convention. Okay, so the only thing left to consider here is what are we talking about when we use the term racemic mixture? And another word that means the same thing is a racemate. So racemic mixtures, or racemates, are 50-50 mixtures of two enantiomers. Right, so the R form of thalidomide, thalidomide is the marketed name of thalidomide. So the R form, it's optically active. It bends plane polarized light in the positive direction. So if we took a sample that contained only the R form, we would see optical activity. We would have an alpha sub d value. And likewise, if we had a sample that just contained the S form of thalidomide, it would be optically active. But maybe our sample contains both, and it has to be a 1-to-1 ratio of the S to the R forms of thalidomide. This sample is not going to bend plane polarized light, okay? And so we would say it's optically inactive. And it makes sense because the alpha sub d values of two different enantiomers are equal in magnitude, but opposite in sign. Okay, so they're going to cancel each other out. To whatever degree the R form rotates plane polarized light, the S form is going to rotate it in the opposite direction, but equally, and so the alpha sub d then just becomes 0. Okay, so these are some vocabulary words that you're going to need to know. You know, what are enantiomers? What is a racemic mixture or a racemate? And what does it mean to be optically active?